All right. So, Kiasmo, the first question is, while reading In Praise of Shadows by Junichiro Tanizaki. I mean, it's not just a
Hmm.
question for Kiasmo. You can also answer it, Fahrenheit. Did you feel? Did you like? This is something which I found out later, but apparently one of the things which Tanizaki is known for is for writing a whole lot of erotic fiction.
Yeah, some prefer Nettles and Quicksand are two of the famous ones. I want to read them, but even in his softer stories, for example, I read this Kyoka Sisters. There is a sort of underlying erotic tension in some of the scenes, but it's not the main focus of those stories. However, you can feel that there is a sort of sensuality. It's sensual the way he writes about many of the topics in this short essay, and I think it's a big thing that works in favor of his style and how he describes things. There is sort of a carnal nostalgia to it.
Yes. So the other essay that we're going to talk about is so the first essay is as I mentioned In Praise of Shadows by Junichiro Tanizaki, and we're going to compare it to an essay by Ango Sakaguchi, an essay called
Mhm.
what was it called? A Personal
A
View of
personal view of
Japanese
Japanese
Culture.
culture.
So Fahrenheit, you said that you read it last night. What do you think of it? Did you like it?
Um, I did like it. I don't think I exactly agree, 100% with the conclusions he had, but it was like very relatable, actually. Like, sort of, especially when he talked about kind of newer, more utilitarian things being more beautiful. Uh, I would like I would say that is the case often, but instead of saying beautiful, I would just say like interesting.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
read it a little bit like uh, it read a little bit like the Italian futurists, a little bit like where they say everything that's in the past has to be destroyed. We won't lose our identity because of that. That is the same kind of vibe, even if, of course, goes a bit deeper than just that. I do understand his sentiments. I think Sakaguchi's points are very interesting, but same, I don't fully agree with his vision of what a culture is and what really makes or breaks a nation's identity.
Right. So um, yeah, a funny thing which in both essays, which I thought like was like at the start they both say that, oh, I don't know much about Japanese culture. I think Sakaguchi
yeah, yeah.
goes as far as to say I don't know anything, but obviously that's a lie. um,
Yeah, same and the same is with Tanizaki because yes, he grew up sort of being a rebel. He wanted to read mostly European writers, but then when he moved to the quiet area of Osaka, for example, the Makioka sisters is set in that area. He rediscovered, in a sense, the beauty of and uniqueness of Japanese culture and literature.
right, right.
Interesting. I also want to point out, of course, that they're not experts, and neither am I. So it's like it's like freakless amateurs already, basically.
Yeah, and
Um,
they are both of them are qualified writers, but they admit that when it comes to the more, let's say, cultural and anthropological side of what makes Japan Japanese, they're like we are the fish in the water. We cannot really tell what the water is.
yeah. What I do want to just say about Ango quickly. Sort of how he came off. Um, I thought he was or seemed to be very honest, right? he there's like a part in it where he was like talking with his friends to very late in the night, and he would get caught by like the police, and
Yeah.
he said that well, when if we were drunk, then like the police wouldn't think we were like leftist
Hmm.
basically. Um, but then he says like, I wish I could blame the police for like my
Yeah.
drinking, basically, and that that's like that like small detail is I
Yeah, I
think
like that
that does
they
show that he is
interjects
like
these
he is,
small details.
yeah, I think it does show that he is like honest, which is
It's
something
like,
I do want to give him credit for.
yeah, it's being cynical towards his own culture, but also towards himself,
Mm.
which I think is his strong. Is it like his strong point? He's very good at being like sort of an observer with some very interesting points of view, but it doesn't say, therefore, because I'm a writer, I'm more qualified. At the end, he even says that pretty much the important thing when writing is coming off with your real ideas, not try to embellish them too much, which is something I agree.
So
And this shown in this essay.
one of the things which I didn't expect, but which came up in both essays, you know, like, so both essays are basically about like what is Japanese culture. And
Hmm.
one of the things, especially I didn't especially expect it in Praise of Shadows, but it was there like right
I
at the
can
start.
imagine
You know what it is? Toilets.
the toilets,
Yeah.
of course.
uh,
It's something that we Europeans will have a difficult time to say, like, well, maybe we Italians we will joke a little bit about it. There is a joke in a movie by an actor called Antonio De Curtis, well known as Totò in Italy, where they joke about a type of urinal that they are called Vespasiani, which is the name of the emperor that built them in Rome. And they're like, we are going to put this one next to the Colosseum because it's in honor of this emperor. So uh, that's the way we will tackle it, more like a joke. Whereas here it's taken rather seriously in a sense. The description of Tanizaki pretty much describing someone on the toilet listening to the rain outside. It was quite interesting, but at the same time came off rather well. It wasn't jarring; it was just a little bit weird, but it made sense. It was organic with the rest of the sort of storytelling that was going along with the essay and why Japanese toiletry is the toilets are that way rather than the sterile ceramic, like the usual white stuff that you will see everywhere in European countries.
and I guess
Yeah. Sorry. This is in like very stark contrast to um oh man, I regret speaking now.
Sakaguchi.
Toko, yeah. How Sakaguchi described, let's
The
say, the
urinals,
toilet,
yeah, like
yeah,
no,
of
sorry, not
like
the
the
urinals. Sorry, it's like the restrooms. It's like with the bowls, like in the old times, you
yeah,
would do what do your
yeah,
business and then throw it out.
and especially the toilets um, with the troupe, right? The performers, and like how he would say like the
Mhm.
like stage
That's
was like
it was almost like, in a
disgusting.
sense, the stench of the urine was part of the appeal of going to these mediocre shows. It was like made it even more interesting to him in a sense. It gave it a new layer of value, despite
Yeah,
being the smell of urine.
Yeah,
it,
and
it's funny because each they're like very different views on toilets.
mhm.
It's kind of like a good like signal to like their respective perspectives on like the same culture basically. I think Tanaka, no, Dr. Tanaka Sakaguchi, he grew up in a more sort of westernized area of Japan. So I guess like I'm just guessing he wouldn't have experienced the same toilets as as um, um, as a Tanaka as a Tanaka.
Tanizaki.
These are yeah, yes, Tanizaki. These are Japanese names like really throw me off. I apologize.
No, that's fine.
So I guess another thing related to toilets, I guess, is shit and shit sticks.
Yeah, it's something that Sakaguchi brings up a few times, contrasting it with beauty itself. In a sense, he's taking the sort of Buddhist slash Zen approach that both extremes in the end work to the same end, in a way, which is kind of interesting because he uses it in a sort of ironic way. There are layers to those takes, which I find it's really interesting. And again, I really
Yeah, like
like this.
yeah. Yeah, doesn't he compare like the shit stick with the Zen rock garden
Yes,
and
yes. He says that.
yeah, and he says basically that the only reason why significance is attached to the rock garden and why the rock garden sort of goes forwards into the future is because of the sort of the esoteric um, and sort of
Exactly.
um, you know nature of Zen.
Yeah.
Um, but like here, I kind of disagree. Like I think rock gardens just look nice. Like
No, it's true.
I have
But I
like
think
a
he's trying to what he's trying to say is linking with the
yeah
point you
yeah
were
yeah
making before about how a tradition makes sense only when there is a sort of weightiness behind it, and that
yeah
weightiness
yeah
does
a
not
dignity.
come automatically. It takes time for it to take shape. Which is the same that, in a sense, Tanizaki is saying that it was probably also because of how Japan's environment with with its rains and snowfalls caused to a degree shadows to rain into the house because they had to build them that way, and so it was something in between necessity and the natural evolution of those people. And I think this is something similar, only taken to the extreme of which Sakaguchi was talking.
Yeah 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 I got that right. Um, I'm just thinking. Well, I mean, the SS. Um, at the end of the day, I don't think really ever could kind of be attached to Zen, unless something very weird culturally happened at some point. Um, whereas the rock garden kind of stands on its own anyway, right? And
Yeah,
you can
some
sort
of the parts in Sakaguchi are a little bit like it's a bit more difficult to make connections with other points,
it,
whereas Izaki is way more organic. There is a free flow to his ideas, and yet they are well connected.
I think another thing we should keep in mind is that Sakaguchi's essay is like a response video, basically, to to uh, this guy called Bruno Taut. Um,
Yeah, the German
uh,
architect
yeah,
that came to Japan and was like, "Oh, real guys, neon lights in Japan? Are you crazy? It's like the hell you want? You're a German coming to my country. You want me to to adapt to your ideas what my country is?"
yeah.
In
I
a
mean,
sense, yes, it's a response to that.
yeah, because Sakaguchi. So basically, this German architect is called by a millionaire or something, um, to give lectures and whatnot, and he wrote a book apparently about
Yeah, I was reading in the notes.
how traditional Japanese culture is superior and at least more suited for Japan, and Japan shouldn't adopt modern architecture
Yeah,
and uh, and whatnot.
Architectural otaku in a sense.
In a sense, yeah. Um, and Sakaguchi basically calls him a tourist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
like uh, he basically says that like you had to discover what it means to be Japanese, but it's like it's not something that you can define. Like uh, it's not something that comes to be into being by through an explanation of it. Or something like that. And I guess I mean in a way you could I don't think Ango himself says this, but you could say that like even if you're looking at your own culture's past, if you have to quote unquote discover it, then you're also like a tourist towards your own
true.
culture almost, because
We can infer that, yes, indeed, to a degree, when you stop to live your culture and you start to overanalyze it. In this way, you lose the focus of it and it becomes something artificial.
and yeah, basically Sakaguchi argues that culture needs to be quote unquote honest.
Which is the same thing that Tanizaki, in a sense, praises, and that's why, in a sense, he's resigned to the idea that Japan is changing, and therefore the culture too will change, and certain things that were common use in the past will go away and be replaced by something else.
Yes, yes. I mean, basically, I don't think that Tanizaki has any really that many positive prescriptions about what should be done, um, or whatnot.
Honestly, yeah, it seems more like someone who understands why these changes are happening, and he cannot find a solution to go back to once was popular, to once what was the culture and tradition. The only saving grace for him, in a sense, is uh, the rural Japan, where he says that he went there and he learned the special way of preparing sushi. And it's like this will, in a sense, he say this will survive because it's something that people do every single day, day after day, season after season, because it's part of their life, their daily life. It's not something that they need to put on like it was a mask for a theater performance. It's something natural,
Yeah,
and that's why that's the only hope for him, in a sense.
Yes, sorry.
no, no, you go on.
Yeah, something I noticed is that there was a lot of talk about the material, and like not a lot was said about like ceremony, right? Like what does Ango think about weddings? Like the Japanese wedding, for example, and would he like call that like fake and gay, for example? Uh, like I think there is real value to ritual.
Oh, of
Um,
course.
it was it was. I think it's. I don't think it's insignificant that they kind of avoided that question. Um,
Well, in a sense, I think they both answer this question. Sakaguchi is more like the ritual must arise naturally from the people. Only stay and is taken in this sense similar to Tanizaki. Only Sakaguchi is a bit more dismissive. Like, I don't care if this doesn't exist anymore. As long as we Japanese exist, we can always in a sense reinvent the wheel. And even if the wheel has a different shape, at the end is the wheel that we reinvented, the wheel that we built.
yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I would this makes a lot of sense, right? But I mean, I didn't really understand quite what it meant. The difference between sort of keeping up a old culture and then sort of keeping up a new culture, and sort of until I went to a Christian funeral and then like a atheistic funeral, and the difference was night and day. Whereas one there was sort of a sense of closure because I guess as it was described, there is this sort of transcendent dignity that comes with tradition. Um, that this is very important to have sort of you know in the funeral. But whereas this new tradition, if you can kind of call it that, um, felt very sort of it didn't feel fulfilling in the same way. I don't really know what we're getting at here, but I think you know sometimes when you lose something, you're like not going to get it back, right? And I think can often be like very important for a specific job. And my counter would be to his point that he made is that well, like you don't really know that you can reproduce the dignity of the tradition again. It might just be lost forever, and you also lose these sort of old ties to what the people were as well. But I don't
Sure.
know.
I think Sakaguchi is a bit more, in this sense, he seems to have a more Marxist read that culture comes. How culture comes about is different, is a different thing compared to how traditionally viewed. Usually, it's like the people are influenced by those in command, and those in command are informed by the culture that made them grow up. Whereas for Marx, the system, I don't recall exactly how it is, but I know it's different. It's more like the people from above impose a view. Um, I don't recall exactly, but since Sakaguchi used to be around those circles, even if it wasn't exactly one of them, I think to a degree his view of culture was influenced by the cultural revolution of the 60s. And so maybe that's why he has this kind of.
I I don't think
Uh,
he was there around in the 60s. So maybe you mean
doesn't he
early.
say that? Yeah, but doesn't he say that it was mistaken? It was in those circles to a degree
I
in the essay. Not saying it was directly involved, but for sure
Yeah, yeah,
by osmosis.
yeah.
It was part of a magazine, so maybe some of these ideas entered this worldview and influenced it to a degree. Whereas Tanizaki seems a bit more old-fashioned in this regard. Even if he's not optimistic, he understands the value of the old Japanese culture in a sense, and even if it's disappearing, he says that one was as real as any culture that will come after.
Mm. So I think basically the reason why a secular funeral looks fake is probably because it's like a pale imitation um of a religious funeral
Yeah,
essentially.
very often it's like this with even with weddings.
Yeah, it is not something like totally different which came about on its own. It's just a pale
Hmm.
imitation of so it's basically like those things that Tanizaki was complaining about, like
Yeah.
you know those fake lamps which were made to look like traditional lamps, but
Well,
yeah.
even Sakaguchi seems to complain about this towards the end when he says the last sentence of the essay is, "As long as we live sincerely, apish imitation is nothing to be ashamed of. If it is an integral part of our everyday life, Life's apish imitation is as precious as creativity. It seems to be sort of admitting that this is but something lower than real culture, even if he
I
gives it value.
no, I think what he means by apish imitation there, he's talking about like, you know, shitty Japanese cars and buildings made to look like Western buildings, but
Exactly, yeah, that's the thing. He's saying even if this is but something try to imitate a different culture, that why cars were built that way, there was a reason behind it, etc. Instead, it's done just because it's the thing in vogue at the moment. I think it's the same thing. To Even if the extent is different when it comes to trying to imitate something that is deeply entrenched in a culture that's part of its real identity.
um,
Only the
Yeah.
in a sense the difference is even more upsetting, because at least with copying a car was a rather recent invention, whereas trying to copy a ritual, be it a Christian wedding or um, a Buddhist wedding, something like this, it would be completely different because it's something that took shape over thousands of years. So I think it's two different kinds of imitation, and
right.
maybe Sakaguchi is a
Yeah,
little bit of that.
yeah. I mean, you know, basically the car is already vulgar, so um, what does it matter if it becomes even more vulgar? Maybe
Hmm.
it's better if it becomes more vulgar when we are making an imitation of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I
Yeah.
mean, uh,
Yeah. Sorry.
Fahrenheit did make an interesting point that like both of them seem to be concerned with the material, and I mean on the other hand, like you like when you're talking about even when like traditionalist people are talking about stuff like architecture, it's hard not to talk about like the material side of it,
Yeah, because it's
obviously.
the first thing that strikes the sense.
um, because that's literally what the thing is made of.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. Sort of.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Fahrenheit, go.
Sort of on a different note. Another another sort of stark contrast between the two of them is when Tanaka Tanizaki, I don't know, he talked about the Kabuki theatre,
Hmm.
and how it's the face, the hands, and the feet that are given them prominence. And he says, well, the reason for this is because this is basically how women used to exist, how a Japanese woman used to exist. They would sort of hide their stick-like figures,
Yeah, everything else is
and the
flat.
children would only see the face, the hands, and the feet, and the rest of the figure would be shrouded in mist darkness. But then
Saka,
the Tanaka, yeah,
Sakaguchi, or
yes,
yeah, okay.
yeah, sort of nearing the start, he says, oh well, this is obviously false." It was just like quite like a funny moment because I remember like listening to the audio book version, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then you know, and then Mr. S comes along and he's like, yeah, like this, yeah, like that's probably wrong. And I was like, oh,
Did he say anything about what did he say about Kabuki Kyasmo? I can't remember.
When it talks about Kabuki, Tanizaki is more like it describes it as
No,
a
I mean Sakaguchi. I don't think Sakaguchi said
no,
anything.
it talks for a little bit about the no theater, but again, not really
and
praising it. And then it
what's
talks about another theater. Talks about a theater, but it's more like a modern theater with a modern. Um, I think it's talking more about modern dance recitals next. to
Yeah,
the
I think
Maiko next to the young
I think
geisha.
yeah, I think I was unclear. What what he was just disagreeing with is the form of like the woman just being that hands, feet, and face.
I
Basically. Um,
hmm. Did he say that? I can't remember. Did Sakaguchi say anything about that?
I keep
I
getting these
think
two
he
mixed
talks
up,
a
which
little bit, but
however.
very briefly.
Hmm.
I remember he talks about the difference between how this the attempt of making women beautiful in this in the like with Maiko, these young women that are not really fully developed, uh, feels rather cheap and kind of lacking in grace. Whereas, for example, yeah, then he compares it to something that happens in China where they blind these girls and force them to train and be able to just pretty much to become dancers, and that's it for the rest of their lives. And he
Yeah.
says this is more extreme, and yet it's because of how extreme it is, it makes it more pure and even attractive in a sense. There is some, it's
So basically, if you're
and
going to
then
make something fake, you have to go all the way. And that's kind of similar to what Tanizaki was saying about Kabuki. I think he was criticizing
it's like it's so weird, so exaggerated and everything.
like
Like
the people have so much makeup of powder on their faces that
yeah,
um
and
and
that the electric light and the lights ruin it in a different way compared to how they ruin no performers, because there is already this kind of discrepancy, this kind of vulgarity to kabuki.
Yeah, it, as as like a whole piece, I think Into Shadows was the most kind of like bizarre because because like he's literally talking about like how his people like basically used to hide in the shadows, right?
Mhm.
As you know, as to not show their like you know their skeletal structure or their sort of aging
Yeah,
features, or you know,
mhm. It's more
and
like they
that's
are trying to seduce you with what is half said, half shown, rather than spilling it all out, showing everything.
yeah, like it's yeah, he almost makes like women like sound like these like strange like
Yeah,
creatures,
like
like
almost foreign creatures. At one point, he describes one as a sort of spider. Like he remembers being in this dimly lit small uh, tea room with this woman on the other side preparing the tea, and it's like the darkness of her kimono together with the uh, jet black color of her hair made him feel like he was in front of a giant spider that was
mm,
spreading out a net of darkness.
yeah, exactly.
so about the no, I think he basically I think Sakaguchi basically said something like that he liked this certain piece, like I think it was called Chikuden or something, I can't remember, or maybe something else. That he liked the stuff by this author or whatever, but this no stuff as literature, but he wouldn't be able to stand like actually
If it
going
was, yeah, going to the theater and watching it performed.
like all the weird chanting and stuff.
Hmm.
It would just be so far removed and foreign that yeah. Whereas Tanizaki obviously does not have this problem, and in his case, it's more that he sees something sensual about
Mhm.
about the men who perform.
Yeah, even about the men who perform, it's almost you almost fall for the illusion that they are women,
Mm.
and instead they are men playing that role.
Yeah, and another thing which he did say is that like even if it's an ordinary looking man, when he's up on the no stage, be,
Mm-hmm.
because of the darkness and the costumes,
Exactly.
and also because of the feeling of like authentic and authenticity, which Ango also talks about, like that you can kind of imagine that like there used to be people like this,
Hmm.
but apparently it doesn't seem to work for Ango. For Ango, it just looks
No.
weird. Um, I mean, about the thing of uh, when when people are put on the stage, because like one of the things which Tanizaki says is that the man on the stage has a hand which looks exactly like my own, but
Mm-hmm.
it looks infinitely more sensual and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but at the same time, and he says that sort of feeling is lost, but at the same time, you could say that at least until recently, maybe back, people used to say, at least I've heard people say about the golden age of Hollywood and whatever, that like like obviously the people on the silver screen or whatever, they're just normal people, just actors, but they did, um, I guess, shine and seem appear more sensual just because they were put on the stage. So I guess
Yeah,
something
maybe
similar.
there is something about being placed in such a scenario, or taking such roles for a movie that elevates that something in almost anyone, no
Mm.
matter how vulgar they may look in real life when they're on the stage with the proper costumes, with the makeup and everything. They transcend themselves and truly become the character that they are supposed to be taking on. And maybe that's what elevates them as well.
So I think that both when especially Sakaguchi, but also Tanizaki. So when Sakaguchi talks about honesty, and necessity, um, like it's always like it's always like a material. It's like a material necessity, like according to the people's desires, according to how people actually live.
Hmm.
Um, and I would say that's basically the same with with Tanizaki, because he says that the reason why uh, the Japanese started to see beauty in darkness is because darkness is what they had. So,
Yes.
so,
The way they built their houses was a response to the Japanese weather, and therefore they had to block out the elements, and at the same time that blocked out the sun, and thus they had to adapt to this world they had to shape around them. Which,
uh, yeah,
again, I think it's a fair point.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
it's sorry, sorry. It's kind of interesting to think about. I guess because just like climate wise, I know it's not like directly comparable, but like England is very it's like geography is quite similar in a lot of ways. We do get a lot of darkness, a lot of sort of rainfall,
Mhm.
etc. But you, as he points out, we like to overlight everything, right? So it's almost as if somehow we're like the complete opposite, basically, in that regard. I, my my interpretation. is that it's something to do with like the blood um, of like the Japanese people, right? To like try and not get Eurochannel demonetized students, and and there's something sort of about the Japanese people that produce this kind of outcome under this particular circumstance, which is different from the Europeans or some or maybe the Chinese, right?
Um,
But I don't know.
so a few weeks ago, we did a stream on a movie by Kubrick, a movie called Barry
Barry
Lyndon,
Lyndon.
and well, one of the biggest selling points of that movie is that the whole movie was shot in quote unquote natural light, or like candlelight. So basically, when
Mhm.
when people were indoors, um, they used candlelight. Um, I don't know, like I do agree. I do agree that so it looked like, because of that, because they used candlelight, it looked like a lot better than other period dramas. So yeah, so basically Barry Lyndon um, is a period drama set in England, mostly in England, um, but also in Prussia a little bit. Anyway, it's set in 18th century Europe or something, I think. And uh, because they used candlelight, like obviously the rooms were a lot darker, um, and everything basically looked better essentially, compared to other period dramas where like everything is shining. Where they're using basically electric light on the set. And yeah, from what I've seen of Korean dramas, uh, and whatnot, Korean period dramas. Um, they look very gaudy, and that reminded me what Tanizaki when he was talking about
Yeah.
like the gold, especially um, that I don't know, that it didn't look as extravagant as it does
Hmm.
now, because now like is that maybe that's true to an extent, but at the same time, like these people did like, for example, he talks about the priest's clothes with gold and embroidery or whatever on it, um, but at the same time, like it's not like people didn't see um, uh, these nobles and priests and whatnot wearing these clothes in daylight at any point. It wasn't all in the darkness. But yeah, I do agree that like obviously, like, indoors especially. But again, like he's putting the emphasis on the practical use almost,
Yes.
um, of gold.
It seems to be really focused on that. It is true that Western architecture very often, even in the past, try to inject as much light as possible. But I think Tanizaki's view has been um, skewed by the fact that he came in contact with European architecture that was already from the 19th century. In the past, one of the things that the nobility of Europe very often was praised for was how pale their skin was. And to achieve that kind of paleness, one of the ways would be to shield yourself from the sun, because if you went to work in the fields, you'd be rather tanned. And it was seen as something like for the lower classes. So, sure, they wanted the rooms to have light, but at the same time, it wasn't so bright as today. If you go to very old houses, if you go to very old palaces, there is light, but not as much light as in many of the of modern buildings, even for the modern elites. So I think Tanizaki has been a little bit misguided because he has seen only one aspect of European architecture. Surely he's right when he's talking about churches, especially those of the Gothic period. But if you enter, for example, an old, a very old church or cathedral, usually there is the lack of light. In a sense, puts you closer to the transcendental, makes you reflect about the nature of things in a different way and about God.
Right, like basically a lot of these churches are also very dark, uh, just
No,
like.
exactly. That's the thing. I'm not denying that certain styles predict trying to get as much light as possible inside the building, but at the same time, it's not very common to have windows on the level, let's say, where the pews are. Usually, they are up above,
Yeah, exactly.
and they bounce off the walls, and that's how there is light inside the church. It's almost never direct light coming
Yeah,
from outside.
yeah. I do agree with this. When Britain was a very dark place, lit by candlelight. Sort of
It's because I do believe shadows indeed improve your desire to be recollected, to detach from material things because everything is a little bit blurred, and so you can focus more on things that are above the material, and that's one of the great advantages of partial or complete darkness.
Mm. Sort of reminds me of what Sakaguchi was saying about Buddhist temples, how they are built to be exactly the opposite of what a home is like, so as to um, like take your thoughts away from, I don't know,
Yeah,
your wife and
exactly.
kids.
From anything that can distract you from contemplating the higher concepts or the high spheres and etc. Which I agree. That's one of the points of trying to detach yourself, be it in a Buddhist way, be it in a Christian way. Sometimes you need to do, if you want to really think about these things, pray and meditate, you need to have a space that it's like secluded from the material.
Right. I don't know which is more which of the two are more bare. Though whether churches or temples are more bare of. I would say probably temples are probably because I've been to been to both.
Hmm.
And I would say from my experience anyway, the temp the temples seem to prefer to keep it more empty.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's because we also need to remember that a Christian church in the past was not just a place of worship, but was a place of learning. You would go there and you could explain to your children. You will see the portrait of a saint and some of the events surrounding his life, and that then you can explain why and how, and you will teach them about virtues or the dangers of sin through those images that were plastered on the walls. There was this also. There was not just um, a religious, like purely religious reason for all these paintings. Of course, there was, but there was also a pedagogic side to it. They would be there to teach, and since many people weren't able to read, you would paint what they needed to learn in a sense, and then people
yeah,
could explain. So, of course, a temple, like in certain other traditions, is empty for the same reason. You need to empty yourself. You need to become kind of like the temple itself. I do believe that's one of the concepts for the emptiness.
yeah.
Whereas in a church is a little bit different.
I kind of I kind of think the nature of the faith also affects how much light can
Absolutely,
be put
yes.
in, right?
After all,
Because
Japan.
yeah, yeah, because with something like crystal, a type of Christianity, um, you have this theme of a divine of the divine light, and so you want your church to have big
Some
windows
form of, yeah.
that let a lot of light in,
Hmm.
uh, but
At least around
also
the altar.
incredibly,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and also incredibly ornate, stained glass. The window
Hmm.
is a is sort of a well is a key feature of a church
Yeah.
or a cathedral, whereas I
Hmm.
don't think I don't think the same can really be said about temples.
Mm. One thing which Sakaguchi said, which I found very unconvincing, and I think he also repeated that in Darakuron, is that like, oh, the Japanese are not the type of people to keep a grudge.
So
Yesterday's,
that when I was like, really? You sure about that? Ango.
I think so. The this I believe came after the war, like as well. So like, let's convince ourselves that like, oh, we are not the sort of people to to keep a grudge because
Nice scope.
that's more convenient. But I think that um that's basically kind of his point that like the beliefs are whatever is necessary at the moment, essentially, at
Which,
least
to a
for the
degree, it's
yeah.
sort of true.
Um,
I do agree that sometimes, but it's not unique to the Japanese people. I think that sometimes there are large swaths of a nation that, as soon as the leader says A, they say A, and as soon as the leader says B, they say B because the leader said it, and that's it. To a degree, that happens everywhere, and
hmm.
sometimes burying a grudge, maybe you bury it without even realize you have it there. It's like dormant inside of you.
Because in the first place, Bushido and all that used to be only for the samurai class.
And
And
even then,
yeah,
it wasn't really followed by me.
yeah, it wasn't really for even then exactly. It wasn't really followed. I think in the Rakuron he says like the history of samurai was not Bushido but Machiavellianism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which again is true. He's not wrong in saying that, but then oftentimes he arrives to these exaggerated like conclusions on certain things. Other times I think he's spot on, and then he leads these ideas to strange conclusions that sometimes leave me confused.
right. Okay. Um, s- so let's see. Sakaguchi talked a bit about the kimono. I don't think did. Oh yeah, I think Tanizaki. Did he talk about
Yes,
just the clothing?
he talked a little bit how the kimono was in a sort of way a way to keep the body hidden, especially for women, to keep them more as an idea rather than a person. You would like Arnett was saying, describing them more like a stick figures with just a head and hands and feet, and everything else didn't exist. It was just a drape put onto this
Right.
sorry, onto these parts.
I
Yeah,
see.
yeah, this like phrase.
Whereas Sakaguchi basically just says, "Oh, that's just because Japan only came across
Yeah.
superior Western clothing a thousand years later." Um, but
Yeah, we were too poor to make anything. I
but
don't know.
and I guess this sort of brings us to another point which Tanizaki makes a few times that
Yeah,
hypothetically
if
like
only we,
exactly.
if only we invented this, if only we had that, maybe it would be different. He says it. I do think there is a little bit of irony in it. It's like this is just me daydreaming. Maybe it would be the exact same. It's just how we develop certain things is different. And
Yeah,
then we came across a completely different way of doing it, and we decided to go with this new way.
yeah. In a way, it reminded me a little bit of that shitty sequel to Avatar. They are the Last Airbender. What was it? The Legend of Korra
Yeah,
or something.
Okora,
Yeah, where like
yes.
it's a shitty show, but anyway, like the setting is like
Yeah, steampunk all of a sudden. We moved from tribal people with their own unique identity
no,
to.
it's sorry. What I wanted to say is that it's like the industrial
Yeah, yeah,
revolution,
yeah.
but
Hmm.
in the East.
Exactly.
And it looks so funny. It's not silly.
Yeah, and honestly, they did. If you were to say this is generic steampunk Victorian world, it didn't feel Asian really. I don't know. It came off like again what um, Tanizaki is complaining. Like we just took on these clothes and draped ourselves, and we look weird in them, which is something that even Sakaguchi seems to admit to a degree, saying that we Japanese walk funny when wearing these clothes.
Mm.
For
Yeah.
what little I saw of Legend of Korra, because I couldn't stand it.
Yeah. I mean, another thing which Sakaguchi says is that like if a Westerner wore Japanese clothing, he would look more grand than Japanese, obviously. But
Yeah, that
I'm not
was
sure.
weird.
I'm not sure because I don't know. It always looks a bit weird when I see non-Japanese people in
It
in
was one of
cosplay.
those famous memes from 4chan about the guy dressed in a in a traditional kimono with that wall of text, sort of
Yeah,
making him sound
yeah,
like some pretentious ass.
yeah. And I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, it might have seemed weird to Sakaguchi and to Tanizaki, but I don't think that now anymore. Like seeing a Japanese person in Western clothing is weird to anyone. Um,
No, at this point, everyone knows that in certain settings, you have to put on Western clothes.
so yeah, uh, so Tanizaki complains like there's a very weird like of all the complaints about modernity at the very end, Tanizaki complains about something. Um, um, but before that, let's say that so the next thing which Ango says is that like there used to be this long wooden bridge, um, and like
Oh yeah,
apparently when he was a kid, like he was very sad that it was taken down and replaced with with a I guess
steel one,
with
yeah,
a
concrete and steel one.
yeah um, which I don't know like if you can contrast it, but I found it a bit funny. But so that's what he thought when he was younger, but now it just seems natural to him. Like, but obviously,
Yeah.
this but the thing about Tanizaki, which I found funny about his complaint about like traffic lights. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like of all the
How they
problems.
look jarring.
Yeah, of all the problems that you know when people complain about
Of
modernity,
modernity.
like um, yeah, I mean, I don't like traffic lights either, but still, I
It's
personally,
better than crashing into
yeah, and I don't know
the traffic.
when driving or cycling anyway, I tend to prefer um traffic lights over roundabouts anyway.
Yeah.
But
Even
maybe
if there's,
yeah, go on.
even if a lot of places really like to put roundabouts everywhere.
Right. Um, because like in a way like the people who want roundabouts everywhere, like say or like that's better for nature or whatever, like because there's a little bit of grass in the middle or something.
Yeah.
And or it's not like the traffic lights which are more unnatural uh, because they're
Mhm.
electric or whatever. Okay. Um, let's see. What else is there to talk about? Hmm. I mean, I kind of get the feeling that Tanizaki lived a more comfortable life. But that's not really true. It kind of feels that way because um, Ango is sort of like
Stone, yes.
constantly complaining about
Yeah, there is like this cynical, it's like this cynical, grumpy guy almost.
yeah.
Whereas Miyazaki seems a bit more like a like someone with a little bit of what we would call spleen, that kind of melancholic um, fondness for something that's it's gone. He realizes it, but he still cannot get over it.
Yeah, he seems more like an for example, when Ango Sakaguchi was complaining about the temple of the Golden Pavilion, he was saying that it was just something built by elegant, rich gentleman.
Yeah,
Uh,
pretty
uh,
much he's saying it. Part of its beauty is because this person was such an extravagant person, and he was like a spoiled child, and he had the means to create such bizarre and opulent things that gives it a special beauty.
yeah,
Whereas Tanizaki will sort of praise it in a different phrase it in a different way.
yeah. I mean, I think
It of course.
I think it's kind of undeniable that like obviously when they were building these great projects, they had extravagance in mind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Reminds me a little bit. This is a complaint very similar to an Italian writer, Alessandro Manzoni. One of his most famous books is called The Betrothed, in Italian I Promessi Sposi. And there is one scene at that time. This book is set 200 years before. Let's say he pretends that he discovered this old manuscript and is trying to translate it in a more modern Italian. But clearly, it's just an attempt to write an historical piece. And at one point, it talks about the construction of the Duomo of Milan. Did you see no pictures of it? Have you ever seen the
Uh,
Duomo of
no, let me have a
Milan?
look. What's it called again?
Duomo, Duomo
Hmm?
of Milan,
Okay, let's have a look.
and 200 years before it was in construction, while this author was writing it, and he describes it as something seen through the eyes of his main characters. That's like a simple farmer. He describes it as a strange machine, like this huge strange machine. And it's interesting because saying something similar to the sort of praise hidden in a complaint that Sakaguchi is pointing at the temple of the Golden Pavilion, because like it is magnificent, but in an almost dissonant way, and it's very similar to how Manzoni describes this huge church
Yeah,
that's in the center of Milan.
I think when talking about the Temple of the Golden Pavilion, he was complaining about how it wasn't opulent and extravagant enough compared to that guy, the stuff built by the guy he was talking about
The
earlier, in
previous
charge,
one, yes,
the,
yes.
the general in charge of
Hmm.
Japan. Um, and anyway, what you said kind of reminded me of um, well, I don't know much about architecture, but when reading the Wikipedia article for the Eiffel Tower, apparently people didn't like it. I don't think it looks.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was because it was supposed to be only for the expo. It was supposed to stay in Paris for I think a couple of years and then be dismantled. And instead they were like, well, we can make a lot of money out of this thing, and they kept it.
Mm.
And yeah, at the beginning it was seen like a eyesore, like this huge thing made of naked steel in smack in the center of the Camp Élysée next to the Arch of Triumph. It's like, what is this doing here? It's so out of place. And instead, in time, it was accepted as a part and a vital part of the image of the city.
I mean, to be honest, when I did go there, I mean, I was disappointed for other reasons as well, but um, maybe because it was a cloudy day, but it did kind of feel like a huge lump of metal as well, a little bit. Um, I guess it
Which it
was,
is, in
yeah.
a sense.
So, speaking of giant lumps of metal, so the three things which, um, I mean, I don't know how much of this is a lab. When Sakaguchi, as examples for things which are beautiful, he gives a dry ice factory, um, a battleship, and what
Yes,
was the other one?
it was the dry ice factory, the battleship, and a prison outside the city.
Um,
I think it's trying to convey the idea that to him, they look beautiful, not because they are extravagant, etc., but because they are uh, what is necessary, and that's it. I don't agree with him. I can understand though where it's coming from. Like the idea that sometimes something that is without any frill, without anything added to it, try and enhance something about its true nature. It's probably the best, and it has its own elegance.
yeah, I would say I think I've already told you this, but there's especially when I would agree with him when it comes to at least vehicles essential
Mhm.
and
No, exactly. With a battleship makes 100% sense because it's a battleship. It has its warlike elegance. In a sense.
yeah, yeah, it's
That's why people are obsessed about trains or World War II tanks or machinery, even like huge vehicles. This kind of thing. There is something fascinating because they merge a sort of simplistic elegance with complete functionality. There is nothing wasted most of the times in any of these.
yeah, but I feel like when architects try to do the same thing like on purpose, when they try to like remove um like any decoration, like
Mhm.
and create a completely functional building, as Sakaguchi says, leaving only uh, the shape of like the unique shape.
Yeah,
It feels like more they are creating something unique for the sake of creating something unique rather than because it's necessary for the function. Like
a little bit, which is also kind of strange because before he was attacking this German guy, Taut, and at the same time, this guy was one of the person who was like a champion architect when it came to the minimalist style of Japanese aesthetics, which is kind of weird. Like this person doesn't get us, and yet this person seems to be in agreement when it comes to this thing. He wants things to stay as simple as possible. I think at one point he's talking about the I don't remember the correct term. It's like it's pretty much the alcoves where they keep the scrolls in the reading rooms. It's something that even Tanizaki praises, and and the tea rooms, etc. And Tanizaki seems to make a little fun of it, but it's weird because at the same time they were very simplistic. And then he says, "Oh, but this kind of simplicity will be counter to it because both simplicity and kitsch are too removed from the nothingness that even simplicity tries to achieve." And then he goes on to praise the minimalism of this prison and the minimalism of this ice factory. I'm like, so you're saying that their minimalism is fine, but the other minimalism is fine, but you don't really say why.
Yeah, I
These
think
are the weird things
yeah,
about him.
yeah,
Sometimes he seems to contradict himself.
yeah. I think it's something um like he just for example he says that he doesn't know about like, a lot of these places that these minimalist places that John
Yeah.
is talking about because um, he's not a tourist and he doesn't go to the little towns
And then
around.
he goes on to describe the little town temples.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Um,
Maybe
he,
he's just trying to say, I don't go to all the very well known ones, the ones that everyone talks about. And that one is understandable. Like, I avoid the touristic
yeah,
attractions.
I think what he's saying is that he's kind of trying to praise the vulgar essentially. Like I guess he's sort of a populist. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
Like um, the people like to go on trains. Therefore, therefore trains are good. And um, yeah, their true desires are not to go to the temple or whatever, but to take go on a train. And because of that, they're beautiful, whatever.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like
And the funny thing, I find Tanizaki way more like honest when he talks about the simplicity and beauty of everyday's life. Sakaguchi, yeah, sounds a little bit like a triad when he tries to do these kind of things. Whereas, for example, when Tanizaki talks about visiting a friend in the rural areas and how he taught him how to prepare a special type of sushi like without any moisture and that it's so fresh and so good. Yeah, it seems to capture the real nature of what the common folks really like and really are, compared to Sakaguchi and his snobbish anti-elitism. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Sometimes it sounds weird.
yeah, yeah. It's like he's like an elitist about not being an elitist.
Yeah,
Like
it's
uh,
like a little bit of an hipster in a sense.
exactly, exactly. Like I mean, like he's like
I was an hipster before there were hipsters.
yeah. I mean, it's I'm like I'm only like I went to this place without
Yeah,
any money
before
and
I
with only my pen. But yeah,
one of the people, and instead it's closer to one of the elites in a sense.
yeah, because not everybody can make a living as a writer or something.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And there
yeah,
is nothing wrong with that, honestly. If one has the skills, talent, and opportunities to make it as a writer, he shouldn't like try to excuse himself. One can still speak for the people, even from a different point of view. There's nothing strange, unusual, or wrong with it. But
um,
yeah, yeah, always trying to sound like a contrarian, someone that goes against the grain no matter what, and
yeah. I think
yeah, after a while,
it's something like you know, like he I guess he kind of sees the minimalism of a, Trout as kind of contrived or something. Um,
yeah. Again, since that this person is an outsider looking in, maybe that's not really understand why this minimalism came,
Mm-hmm.
which that would be a fair counterpoint to his views, like Japanese art is so beautiful because this and that, and he could interject and be like,
But
actually, there could be other reasons.
yeah, but I mean, it's I guess it's something like yeah, like it was. I guess it's to put it bluntly, it's because like he believes in progress. So
Yeah,
uh,
you can feel it.
like so yeah, these things.
When at the end he's like, we could demolish the temple
Yeah,
and build parking lots, and like, what? You
and
what, man?
yeah, we could demolish this great temple, and replace it with a parking lot, and
Mhm.
the great culture of the greatness of
Japan will survive. Yeah.
yeah, will
I'm
survive.
like, no, I don't agree there.
I do agree with one thing which she said though, is that so one thing which she did say is that like when when in um when in Kyoto, like all like going from temple to temple, like after like a certain point, like they all look the same. I mean, I've not been to Kyoto, but like I've I've been to other, I guess, places, and I mean, some people say this about European old European cities. Like uh, after you have been to, I don't know, Saint Petersburg and Vienna, like you can go to other places, but it like it just becomes you can't tell, almost can't tell them apart.
Uh,
Um,
I do not agree,
I
but
see.
I
I
see there is some validity to the point. For
I,
sure, within a certain region, a certain country, there are similarities, of
yeah,
course.
I would say that, like you could probably tell that apart um if you knew if you had more specialist knowledge about like for example when he was talking about no theater. I've tried watching some no theater, and like yeah, I don't really get it, let's be honest. There's these videos by NHK, the Japanese Broadcasting Corporation, where they're like they're like these friendly looking English speaking Japanese presenters, or maybe it'll be like one Japanese presenter and one a Westerner, um, as well, to make you feel welcome or whatever. Uh, and they're going to like explain to you like why this display or whatever is so great, um, and why you should be into it. But then when you try to watch it, yeah, it's you need.
Well, this is honestly can happen with Western plays too. There are a few plays that I really enjoy, and that have been recommended to me. I was like, I don't like this very much. I
Yeah,
can respect the writing. When I um, reading the booklet that comes with it, and I can actually hear what the characters are supposed to say, because sometimes they sing in a way that it's very difficult to understand. So in that regard, it could be the same for the no play, even from a perspective.
I mean, I kind of feel like about a lot of modern music as well. Like I don't get electronic music, and those people, like I've there's this YouTuber called No Thank You. I watched some of his videos, and because he talks about anime, but he also makes music, and like electronic music, or some kind of, I don't even know what the genre is because I don't know that much about music, but um and
Yeah, there are like dozens
yeah,
of genres and subgenres.
and like so when he goes through his own music and he explains it, I can understand the explanation for it. So this is the significance, why this is why it matters. But then
Yeah,
but then when I actually listen to it, I don't actually feel anything. And um I think
in a sense, art
yeah,
should speak for itself.
yeah, and I think basically, mm, that seems to be what Ango is sort of saying, that like he says before this, I have not tried to explain why why it is that I've not even tried to think about why I found this battleship and this dry ice factory and whatever attractive. I didn't even think why it was attractive to me, but like it was something which came from inside.
Yeah,
and
it spoke to me.
and
These items spoke to me.
and earlier on he said like about the, I think it was about the Japanese garden or something, like
Hmm.
that it like that it doesn't really matter like what the actual like the symbolic reason for having this there, that rock there and here and there, if you don't like, if you don't actually feel something when looking at it. um
Which is true. True art should be able to combine both the hidden and the plainly visible,
yeah.
which is something that this, especially the last part, reminded reminded me quite a bit of Tolstoy's "What is Art," where he pretty much says the same. A true piece of art should be able to express the values and the identity of the nation. Should be readily available. Should be easy to understand without fully understanding the culture it's coming from. So it should be able to speak to everyone. And again, it's that honesty, that simplicity, that truthfulness of which both Tanizaki and especially Sakaguchi at the end try to talk like. The most important thing is that it's a true reflection of our identity, no matter how framed.
Yeah, like I guess he's kind of saying like you shouldn't try to make something beautiful, but um
It should come naturally, yeah.
I don't, I guess that's probably, I would say that's probably more true about literature than
Yeah,
architecture.
that's what he's saying at the end, especially. He says that's for me, it's what true literature is. About architecture, of course, it's a different form of visual art,
Yeah,
and it has different rules.
yeah. I think basically,
Yeah.
yeah. Go on.
Um, architecture is sort of a constant fixture, right? Whereas literature is temporary. It offers a temporary experience. I mean,
Hmm.
which means literature can be more sort of gross or sort of novel, whereas architecture needs to sort of be tied down in certain ways so that it doesn't become too garish or it's just I don't know, like oppressive to sort of exist within.
Yeah. It's just that I think it's a case of like he's a writer, therefore, like, I mean I think he basically says that he thinks like, not here. I think elsewhere the novel is the superior form form of art. So
Well, yes, of course. And
that's what
the
I'm saying.
prospect king should, of course, rule the empire, right?
Um, yeah, I mean, he does say something like he does kind of criticize um like doesn't he say something like, oh, these poets these old poets used to say stuff like, making fun
Yeah,
of.
at one point he complains about this pretty much. He reduces them to jesters, like, yeah, you can say all of this, but you're not the king anyway.
Yeah.
So you only be the court buffoon, and that's it. No matter how deep you try to.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it because what the thing is like there's so much random stuff which come like, which I guess keeps it more exciting, but like, um
Yes, after a while, compared to Tanizaki, Sakaguchi's meandering, it's a bit more aimless. whereas Tanizaki is able to move from one topic to another with with a structure. I found it. Yeah, it's here. Uh, if I but have a cask of sake, what use I have for the emperor? Ah, but to be a shoe, and I might be tread upon by that young lass. Among the poets of the collection of 10,000 Leaves, Anacreon and his companions, or the lyricist of China or Persia, wherever in fact there has been culture, there have inevitably been poets expressing emotions such as these. Their ideas, though, are a bore. Questioning the emperor is absurd. These poets were neither born with the makings of an emperor, nor would they accomplish a single thing of significance if, by some miracle, they were to rise to that position. So yeah, it's pretty much saying you're petty, you can stamp your feet and sound profound, but you're in no position to do actually anything
S-
with it.
Yeah, so the next sentence is I yearn for those who live true to their desires, the common man living a common life without apology, a petty man living a petty life with no regrets.
And here
Uh,
it comes,
yeah,
the populist.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, because I
Which is weird because later on he says we should all try and write. Like if something comes genuinely out of you, write it. And here instead he's being like sort of bashful towards those who try to write. Maybe it's just because they saying they got too caught up with their own reputation, with the name they made for themselves. Maybe that's what he's criticizing rather than their poems.
yeah, it's hard to follow. I guess I guess they were not quote unquote honest because because they didn't have the ability to be the emperor or whatever. So um, I don't know if you
But
say
they had the ability to be writers. So again,
yeah.
this seems like kind of a weird complaint coming from him because later on he praises the idea of someone just simply trying to write and be honest, and here instead seems to be saying you'd better be a farmer rather than being this.
So so as the people watching this video, if anyone will notice, I've used a bunch of background images from Steins Gate. Because I don't know, like so Steins Gate is set in Akihabara mostly,
Hmm.
which is like how do I describe Akihabara? It's like
It's like Mecca for weeps.
essentially, yeah. And uh, I mean, I don't know, like obviously half of it is because like it's not actual photographs, but like artwork. So that's why it looks stylish. Like like that passage at the end, which when Sakaguchi says like basically praises like um, the neon lights
Because
and
they are more functional in a sense.
but like I'm not sure like there's a lot of stuff because, so Steins Gate basically sort of has a sort of a cyberpunk in the modern age kind of look to it. Um, and there's a lot of I would say appeal to whatever Japan looked like in the 80s, because when people think about cyberpunk or whatever, that they're sort of borrowing from that as well.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, do people like those neon lights because they are practical, or is it just you
the
know be,
usual the picture of the garden saying back garden in Oklahoma, and then back garden in Japan. There is just the cherry tree, and everyone is freaking out. So beautiful, gorgeous. That's right, yes.
it's interesting because neon lights are very expensive to manufacture. Um, you need like quite a skilled craftsman in order to make these lights, and so for that reason, they're sort of slowly going obsolete, basically. Um, so like, I don't really know exactly how practical neon lights ever were really. I guess
Yeah, it
it's
was a form
I
of
guess
art.
they're just effective, right? It's much better to have like a light that like shines bright in the night than I don't know like some hand painted or like printed sign or something. But that's just my guess anyway.
Yeah, I think it's basically saying something like this worked at this time, so therefore it is good, or something like that. It is at least good for them.
Yeah,
I guess the reason why I talked about it is a bit like, because it's like people almost have like a nostalgia for that sort of thing, given that
Yeah,
here it's like
yeah,
the brand new, the brand new sparkling thing that it's swiping the country, neon lights and street cars.
and yeah.
Yeah, now they are preserved like it's preserved in formalin in this kind of weird aesthetic that mixes the most improbable futuristic things with this kind of retro-ish 80 aesthetic.
I mean, the very definition of, I guess, vulgar, I would say, would be something like, those, those are rubber suits that people used to wearing tokusatsu, um, stuff like Godzilla and whatnot, with like fighting, people wearing rubber fighting in miniature cities. Um, but now, like Hideaki
It
Anno,
has its charm.
exactly. Now Hideaki Anno is like has made like a museum for it, and people are complaining about how like it's a lost art, and whatnot. But at the
Which is
time,
sort of true, but at the same time, you have to recognize the campiness of it. There is
yes, of
sort of an
course,
ironic layer to
yeah, of course.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is true, right? Where uh, you know you sort of have to use the wide angle lens, and you have to get like your miniatures to the right scale. There is like genuine craftsmanship involved in
oh,
that,
oh,
but at the same time, like modern special effects look much better, just like objectively,
they
and
can look way better.
like German audiences aren't going to like watch Anno, in like a Ultraman costume, uh, fight like bug people. Though I would, of course, but
Again, for the sort of enjoyment you get out of camp.
yeah,
There are things that, of course, will survive. For example, the animatronics for Jurassic Park are rather stunning.
yeah. Those are great. Though I will say I think a lot of the prosthetics like they used for the Raptors are like kind of dodgy. Like
Yeah,
if
of course, there
there's
are limits, and they were partially enhanced also with graphics, so there was a blend of the two arts.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, the T Rex is still like awesome.
Ah,
Where like the steam where like the nostrils like steam up the window of the car. Like it's like it is like genuinely cool. Like even now. So yeah, and also like films like um the Thing, and for example,
oh
there's
yeah, both.
amazing practical effects.
But again, one of the ways they were able to get around the limitations is because they played uh, a lot with the shadows. You don't see
Yes,
them
yes,
in
exactly.
light.
Oh,
Again, and
in place of shadow.
yeah, in praise of shadows, exactly. This is the thing. Sometimes the best technique has to be paired with the best of tricks. And I think that's what also it's one of the points of Tanizaki as well, how some of the beauty of certain things was elevated by this world of dim lights because it left room for your imagination. The usual fill in the blanks. To a degree, when you show everything, there is a sort of vulgarity, a sort of lewdness. There is it's the difference between something that is erotic and something that's pornographic. Erotic is something that reveals enough but hides most. Pornography is where everything is unveiled for the naked eye to see. And I think it doesn't apply only to the body, it applies also to ideas and other things.
I guess I guess for Sakaguchi, like for it to be honest, you need to show everything. Essentially, so basically, like the the half hidden beauty of
Even worse, I'd say it's like you need to show the skeleton. Don't stop at the flesh. Rip off the flesh. Rip off
Yeah,
the
I
muscles
mean,
until
doesn't that basically basically didn't that basically happen like in in what was it the short story we talked about last time?
yeah, the idiot when he's
Yeah,
like he sees uh, the people roasted like fowl like fowls. Is like, oh, there is something beautiful and perverse in this. Like I think it's the same kind of acknowledgement of. Reminds me also a little bit of the song by Depeche Mode, "Stripped." Where it's like, let me see you stripped down to the bones. I think it's the same kind of chill exaggeration that titillates.
but
yeah.
doesn't Tanizaki?
I guess,
Yeah, go on.
yeah. I guess Sakaguchi is like the most sophisticated photographer of all time, basically.
And Tanizaki is the one that praises eroticism on the other hand.
Yeah, I mean,
Pin-up, the
so
pin-up in
so basically they're both the same. I don't know. Um, yeah. Uh,
This is like a very like this is a conclusion I didn't expect to reach today, but it does make sense if you think about it, right?
they're like the
Yeah.
two extremes to which one can end up when talking about the beauty of a culture. Either the completely vulgar or the completely sublime. And both of them escape us because they are extremes and they are idealized.
and I kind of, at least with I don't know about I don't know if I don't know if for one to exist the other one does not need to exist. I mean at Tanizaki doesn't speak about it about the beauty in vulgar things, but that's not what the
Exactly. In this
yeah.
case, it seems more like he believes there is a time and a place for everything. He doesn't seem to shun the idea of bright rooms if they are in the right in the right place and with the right surroundings. He just thinks for the Japanese sense of beauty, the sterility of a Western bathroom or the intensity of an electric bulb is a bit too much. And he is resigned to the idea that yes, Japan will change and it's unavoidable because he admits, just like like Sakaguchi, the convenience to adapting certain things. At the same time, he realizes, well, we are losing something that was uniquely ours.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah. This sort of temporary grafting on of
Yeah,
like the light bulb, let's say, to sort of pre-existing structures, sort of reminds me of when we talked about August in the Water, and I was like, I was like soy facing over like all like the cool architecture and things.
oh yeah,
I think I kind of think there is a beauty in something that's kind of like thrown together, you know, in a way like something doesn't have to grow
organically.
neatly. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's still organically, but something doesn't have to be from the same like root all the way up.
Mm.
All the way up to the very top of the tree to sort of have value. Um,
No, yeah,
you
it's
know,
more like rather than a plant, it's more like the different strata in a mountain. There can be different types of rock, one on top of the other, and the deeper you go, the more diverse kind of rock formations, crystals, etc.
Yeah.
Find
I mean,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. I still think even under the very sort of
Yeah,
historically unusual circumstances they've been through, they still managed to make a a well yeah um at least a pretty looking city at the end of the
hmm
day, right? Even if they had to like destroy like 200 rivers to do it, at least there is still something there.
there's
I
something
guess.
tangible.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and a place where you know um, a a girl can, I don't know, like lie on like a meteorite or something.
I mean,
So,
um,
yeah,
like, I mean, Tanizaki like kind of praises the the grime on
Yes, that was very interesting.
so basically that's another way of, like I mean, obviously he was like making a theory about aesthetics, about like the way that the
Hmm.
things look when they have grime on them, um, when they look darker with because they have been used with people
Yeah, there is
have
that kind of opaqueness,
yeah,
of
yeah.
murkiness
And
that develops
yeah,
over time.
thinking about back about the uh, Japanese cityscape in August in the waters. That looked grimy in its own way. Like
Yeah, they eat, and
um,
they eat emanating from the asphalt, the streets,
yes,
and the blurriness they
it,
gave was, yeah.
I guess
when when it's funny because I didn't really see grime when I watched that film. Um, to me, like that place just seemed like immaculate. I don't
No,
really.
I'm saying that, for
Uh,
example,
okay.
it was shot. The way it was shot, it was able to make you feel that kind of like lived in place.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
I'm not saying
Um,
it was dirty. I will say it felt like a real place. Very often
yeah,
in
yeah,
certain movies, when they show cities and other things, it's either completely sterile, like
Marvel Cinematic Heroes.
like a surgeon's operating room, or on the other opposite, you got those movies that is like, this shit is like it's like the gutter. They show only worst of the worst, like where there is just piles of trash. Everything is defaced or half broken down. I think
mm,
in that movie, for example, it made you feel like it was a city where, of course, um, it was clean, but at the same time, it was lived in. When you were in the room of the main character, it was a clean room, but it was a messy clean. See a lot of things, thingamabobs, and other
I,
things thrown around.
I mean, obviously, like when you're sitting on like on a chair in the train on a train, or like in the underground or whatever, on the metro or something, like it's not like uh,
You
like
don't praise it.
it's not like you're thinking, oh, the history of this seat and all the people
Yeah,
who have sat on it. Oh, look how worn
yeah.
out it
You
is.
just think, why this person drank 5 beers before riding the metro, and now I need to sit next to this puddle of
And at the same time,
something like that.
I kind of wonder like whether people actually did think, like while having their soup. Tanizaki claims that like, oh, it's like this aesthetic experience. So like, the people,
Mhm.
maybe some people thought that, like maybe some people can get a little bit,
Yeah, for sure he got that.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
undeniable that some people
yeah.
experience.
I mean, but I've seen like people get sentimental, like wondering about like um, you know, at the
Well, you know,
yeah.
yeah, when people can get sentimental about like anything,
Exactly.
there's yeah, I remember sort of AA doing like a Ash's commentary on like Blackpool, right? And
Hmm.
if you've ever like been to Blackpool, it is like one of the worst places on earth. But I like, but for some reason, AA like got like genuinely like emotional over Blackpool, and it's something I didn't really understand. But once you sort of figure out that it's not just Blackpool, right? It's like our Blackpool, okay? It's like our grimy coastal,
It's our grime, I guess.
theme park city, yeah, it's like it's ours, right? And and it's special. Um, I don't really know where I'm going with this,
It
but
must be a dump, but it's my dump. So
exactly, right.
I have there is something emotional attachment to us that gives a special flavor. The point that Tanizaki makes about the soup, I sort of get the feeling that, for example, he says that very often the plates coming from the west are immaculate white and so on and so forth. Well, for example, one thing I remember about my child was going to my great grandmother's and how the plates were all of them were like painted with different motifs, and usually there was like the at the bottom of them there was always either a flower like um, a small painting of flowers or something like this, some natural patterns, mushrooms, trees, these kind of things. So I agree when you buy that's mass produced bland kitchenware, of course it's going to be the simplest thing. So it's just either ceramic or terracotta, just painted white, then cooked in a oven to make sure that the color stays, and that's it. They deliver it to you, costs way less than if you were to order 100 plates from an artist that makes them and then paints them and makes different sets with different motifs on them. Again, I think Tanizaki is being exposed only to a part of Western culture, and it's a modern part that has the possibility of sending so many items that they
I,
overfill the market even in Japan.
I mean, another thing which Tanizaki said, which I don't know if I was entirely convinced of, is that he thought that like the Westerners have like developed their technology step by step, so the technology is more in line with their nature. But uh, I don't know, like it's not like that. There aren't a lot of Westerners also complaining about technologies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's interesting, right? Because he talks about a dentist for like a short while, and I was just thinking, well, I know a lot of people who like hate going to the dentist, and they're like like literally Western people. So it's like, are these like really like specially crafted for us, or is it just were they just made because they were just sort of objectively better at tending to someone's like teeth, basically?
This
But
case, probably
this,
Sakaguchi's.
yeah,
Sometimes it's out of necessity.
yeah, this sort of makes me think, sort of in like the Dark Ages, or maybe like the darker points of England where we didn't have electrical lighting, where more products were sort of artisan. It's likely that the differences Sakaguchi points out at that point wouldn't really have existed, right? And I think it's just it's because of this rapid technological change that sort of happens in the Victorian era, um, which has really which really made the West stands out from the rest of the world. But yeah, uh, but yeah, like, and that's like that. That's my impression, and that really, there are like significant cultural differences, but when it comes down to like what a culture can mass produce, like tableware, for example, there isn't really going to be many differences anyway. If
Exactly, the
if
variation is
if cultures have like equal levels of technology, if you sort of get what I mean.
yeah. A table is a table. Maybe in some cultures it's lower than others or higher than others, but the table functions the same way. You can change the shape, like, but a table function as a table pretty much everywhere.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. What else did he talk about? I guess when Sakaguchi talks about the dignity of antiquity, um, and how basically that's not enough to make tradition
Itself,
last.
yeah.
Obviously, that's true. But I mean, how much of that? I mean, earlier you said that like you pointed out that Cosmo, you pointed out that um, Sakaguchi had sort of a Marxist background or something. But I mean, if I think a Marxist would more look at it more like and maybe that's what
Well,
Ango is saying.
its background is kind of interesting because it was involved with this. I see in him something similar to Martin Scorsese because both of them wanted to enter religious life, but then because of their interest in certain aspects of the arts, they changed their route. Sakaguchi studied as if I remember right, he studied to become a like he studied Buddhism in school. He was a student in a Buddhist class, and then later on discovered his acumen for literary works. And the same happened with Scorsese. He wanted to enter a seminary, wanted to become a priest, and then he discovered cinematography and sort of gave up on becoming a priest and on faith, despite it being an influence works. So maybe the same kind of bizarre heterodox views when it comes to really religiosity and tradition could be found in Sakaguchi as well, to one level or another, of course. Since it's two completely different religions, they differently.
There's not much talk about class in there.
No,
Um,
no, I'm saying he was taking classes in school, like.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Uh, I guess, and I guess when it comes to Tanizaki's interest, it's not like he gave up on like being an artist to pursue tradition or something. I think to me, it seems like it's mostly like aesthetic kind of interest towards
Mhm.
tradition or something like
Yeah,
that.
it wants to, it's more like rather than it's sort of an anthropological question why this kind of aesthetics developed in my country compared to the West. It's not trying to fully answer. It's more trying to understand how it came about and why it strikes him this way certain things when compared to other sensibilities from other countries, or at least what he perceives are the sensibilities of countries.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, anything else you guys want to talk about?
No, I think I've basically said everything I wanted to say.
I liked when it started to talk a little bit about the difference between a sport like sumo and baseball, and how only someone like Babe Ruth, the famous baseball player, was able to, if not dominate, at least be on the same level with the vast of the field. Like there needs to be a sort of authority. There needs to be a sort of figure that gives way to the action for this sport to gain something more. And I think it's time to say the same can be said of pretty much all tradition. There needs to be a sense of, and then he says at the end, I found the passage, that without sufficient substance behind the dignity, these traditions will eventually fade away. What matters in the end is neither tradition nor dignity nor substance, which is sort of similar to what Tanizaki is trying to say. Only if something it's lived in, only if we are all involuntarily actors. We don't need, in a sense, if you do it uh, knowing that that part of a tradition, if you do it too knowingly that this is, it cheapens it. If you do it earnestly, you don't need to be reminded it's part of your culture. You do it because it's part of you, because you are part of the culture itself. And I think he's trying to say the same about sports, like saying it's the same kind of procedure. The sumo players, these wrestlers, in a sense, this commanding presence that gives a gravitas, gives true meaning to this sport, even with their simpler gestures. And it's the same for, I think it's trying to say, it's the same for any kind of cultural object, cultural tradition, or culture itself. It needs to be lived in and being an honest, real representation of something coming from all the people. In this sense, is populism, in a sense, seems honest, like it's both the aristocracy and the simple peasants who are able to uphold the tradition because they are a living part of it.
Yeah, so basically the tradition comes out of and the culture and the art comes out of how they actually live, rather than some kind of a lap, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. If you start to LARP, it's already being faked because it's just a costume you put on for the sake of putting on a costume, and
Um,
you're trying to sell it to someone from outside,
um,
Yeah.
whereas you will put that costume
However,
on
uh,
for the culture itself. Yeah, no, go ahead. This is just
yeah. However, but if you like hard enough, then maybe it will come true.
well, it's to a degree for sure. There is also that, but if everyone is just fake it till you make it, it's not gonna go very far. I do believe there needs to be a real, like, at least a hard central core of people who truly do it because they truly believe in it implicitly, like without having to be told that they need to believe it. They do it because it's part of their life, a
um,
100%.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's certain stuff, like which I'm not sure why it's there. Like, right after what you just read, like there's the incident of him of Sakaguchi going to the shrine where like uh, people write how much money they want on
Oh
stones.
yeah,
What was the point of that? Uh,
I think it was an attack on how sometimes we reduce our beliefs, such not mean to get a raise or just get some extra money. And I think that's the try when it will be the same as saying, like I was saying yesterday, if I were to put on medieval European clothes from my city and walk around, the best I can achieve is maybe a couple of tourists stop by, ask me to take a picture and they pay a meal for me at a restaurant, and that's it. I'm not going to convince anyone to return to that style, to those clothes. And in this case, I think he's saying if this one becomes just like form, uh, what is basically your belief, just a slot machine, just trying and hoping that one of the kami will bless you with 30,000, 50,000 yen. You're
Yeah.
just turning them into a slot machine,
I I mean,
hoping that.
I think he just described it without um yeah, he just described it and said that it made him feel unsettled because he didn't uh, he didn't have any money either apparently, or so he claims. Um, yeah. Um, what else is there? I guess there's the incident. I, like it feels a lot more. I don't know. Like what would you say? Journalistic.
Yes, compared to
It's
Sakaguchi, oh, sorry, compared to Tanizaki, it's more like an article. The other, it's more like a discourse. Like, it seems like he wants to teach you something, and but then leaves it up to you to keep exploring in a sense.
yeah. I kind of I basically agree with that. Ango's piece that it definitely felt more like a journal.
Yeah, you can almost
Where
say
like he was just sort of like retelling key moments in his life, basically. It's
you can almost see him typing away with a cigarette. Oh,
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like you could like almost make like a film out of it,
hmm
like just from that like one essay, basically, and I think it'd be
it's
kind of
sort
like interesting.
of a diary, like a journey
Like
to these different parts and different events.
Yeah,
l-
obviously some editing would be involved,
No, no, of course.
to like actually turn it into a story, but
Whereas
I think you
Tanizaki
could.
feels more like someone guiding you through a tour of different parts of a Japanese house and explaining
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
why it's
it
this way, why it's the other way, then bringing you to a cafe and an old theater explaining why it looks this way
it's
and
like
why
a
it
yeah,
works
like
this
a tour
way.
guide. Like a
Yes.
yeah. It's more.
Sakaguchi is telling more like a personal story and explaining to you various things that happened during this journey, whereas Tanizaki brings you to a guide and explains some of the details that give me to that area of the house and that other area of the house and the neighborhood.
like sorry, did you want to say something, Fahrenheit?
No, no, it's fine.
I like for example the incident where he and one of his friends go to um the remains of a cult, um and
Mm-hmm.
and then they meet a farmer who thinks that
Yeah,
they're detectives, and
detectives.
that sort of could be something out of a novel, and you,
Yeah.
you don't know how true it is either, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It is. It's one of those things that it's plausible, but you don't know if it really happened or how it really happened. Again, because it's narrating it in sort of um,
Yeah, I
novel like.
mean, from all we know, he could have been like drunk like
he
for
prob
the entire
he
time. So
I mean that
And
he basically says that he was. So I mean
yeah, that they were
I
all sort of.
I mean if he's to be believed, he's drunk all the time. Um, or at least he never fails to point out when he's it seems.
Yep.
Uh, okay. I didn't know that there was a temple of the Silver Pavilion as well, but apparently there is.
Yes, as there are those.
mm. you know, right at the start where he talks about a like French professor
hmm
giving a talk and sort of oh god Sanguch I don't know if you say his name again. I know.
Sakaguchi. Yeah.
Yeah. Saguchi just like bursts out laughing. I wonder
Oh
if
yeah, yeah.
I wonder if like he was like drunk, and that was like
Well,
also why.
it was during a lunch, so it's not unreasonable to think that maybe he had a couple of rounds of wine.
I think I think that like that story makes way more sense if like he was, but I do kind of understand like a French professor coming in and getting like emotional over like a politician. Like
Since this
it's kind of
person,
like the last thing you would expect to like happen.
yeah, especially because this person was like praised for being sort of a nihilist, someone who was into Voltaire, an atheist, and all of a sudden
Oh,
he burst
I'm
into,
an immortalist, but let me get into this emotional
yeah,
cry.
and all of
Uh,
a sudden he spills this eulogy for this for this prime minister that just died. No, it was like a famous politician that was also prime minister,
mm,
and and Sakaguchi, maybe also because of the alcohol, we cannot say, but could be that there was also alcohol involved. At one point, thinks that it's just like all a ruse, all a joke, and then starts laughing when he realizes that no, this is honest. It's like makes it even more ridiculous. It's sort of fascinating to see. And then he says, "I never saw someone giving to me such a bloodthirsty glance."
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
And
very
then there is a strange talk about the national character, like we Japanese are not vindictive, we'd rather turn all enemies into friends, which is always the weird part.
mm.
Thinking about what Japan did during World War II.
Oh,
yeah, but for some reason, like the Japanese only remember half of it, like getting bombed by the Americans. That um,
Well, of course, everyone remembers their own tragedies.
yeah, and like to be fair, like it wasn't like it. It would have been like a very small like amount of the population who like committed
No, of
like
course.
those
Yeah.
horrendous war crimes compared to like
Hmm.
compared to all the citizens who just got like firebombed and things,
Yeah,
But
of
it
course.
does like statistically it does make a kind of sense.
yeah, and
But yeah, like
Sak-
it's
Sak-
interesting because I think every country is kind of like this, with exception to maybe like the Germans, where like we remember winning the First World War, but we don't remember like starving out the Germans basically through like a blockade. You know, I think this is just like it's sort of like a universal in a way.
Sort of a selective amnesia about certain,
yeah.
yeah.
Also, of course,
And
Sakaguchi did not go fight for the war, and according to him anyway,
mhm.
I think I said last time as well. According to him anyway, the reason that he was rejected for service was that they didn't want this degenerate writer being a bad influence on others. I don't believe
On the
that.
other truth.
I don't believe that shit
Yeah,
anyway.
I think this guy is trying to make a little bit of a legend of, oh, I would have been such a bad influence. I was a rebellion, like insurgency,
Yeah. I mean,
a mutiny inside the army.
there's a very interesting essay, or again in that the same volume called in the same volume called literary. So the volume is called literary mischief, and that's where the essay that we have been talking about, a personal view of Japanese culture, can be found. And the essay after that is called Pearls, and it
Mhm.
again by Sakaguchi, and he wrote that not that long into the war, and it's about a bunch of Japanese soldiers who did a suicide attack on Pearl Harbor, and at least he seems patriotic there. I mean, I'm not sure. Like, it's a bit weird. Um. Okay. That about that about. I don't know. I think we kind of talked. talked a lot more about Sakaguchi. That
Yeah, even because Tanizaki, his essay is very difficult to analyze because again, he moves very in a very eloquent, elegant way between one topic and another. So it's difficult to separate them. They flow into one another. It's a little bit like I would describe it like there are small ponds all connected by the same stream, and they flow one into the other. And
mm,
that's why this essay is difficult to isolate different parts because you will kill the flow literally.
mhm.
Yeah, I also think it's because I read the Sakaguchi, but I listened to the to Mr. A, and and
Mm,
so I don't know, maybe I absorbed more through the reading. Also, I think Sakaguchi wrote his piece was longer. I think, but I don't know. Um, but yeah, I really wish I could remember names. It's always just constant name blindness with me. But Mr. A, his writing in this instance was very concise. As you were saying, Chasmo,
mm,
and it all did flow very nicely. Um, Whereas, yeah, these sort of journal style of Sakaguchi was made it a bit more scattered. But I
Yeah,
don't know, they were both interesting in their own way, and they brought up some very interesting points that I like I had noticed in my life, but hadn't really acknowledged until I sort of read these works basically. So that was pretty good.
mm.
I guess is there anything about beauty or aesthetics that you feel that um they c- they they both kind of missed? Um,
I guess oftentimes aesthetics can stand on their own, and they don't really need to be attached to a culture to have their own merits.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the surface is all you need because it's sort of deep in its own way, right?
Hmm. Yeah, beauty should be able to stand on its own even without deeper meaning. If you can give it deeper meanings, even better. But the core is if something is beautiful, it's beautiful, and then you can read deeper in it. But it's a different story.
yeah, I mean, I guess another interesting thing is that like obviously this was meant for a Japanese audience to convince them of something. Um, but I don't feel like there's anything which is not understandable to us there, uh, or maybe there is, and uh, we are too dumb to get to even get that. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah.
All is possible, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably the reason why we talked more about Sakaguchi is because, as you said, it's more scattered. It's more like it's more flavored and scattered with like
You
little.
can identify different parts.
Yeah, I think he also has subsections, but I don't think the
Yeah,
sections really mean anything. Like
yeah, they were a bit confusing. If I,
they're subtitles, but
Yeah, like home. Yeah, and I forget. Anyway,
yeah. But I'm not sure. I don't think Tanizaki had those.
no, no.
So next week, more Ango. Um, pro-
Even it's spelled different.
yes. We are going to talk about an anime called Ango. Yeah, and with that said, I think I don't think it makes much sense to give ratings to essays.
No, but I'd say these
nah.
two essays are worth reading. I'd say
Yeah.
both of them show interesting points of view by two um, smart persons. It's undeniable that both Tanizaki and Sakaguchi hold interesting points of view and are very good at explaining them in their own unique ways. Sakaguchi, in some points, is a little bit confusing compared to Tanizaki, but nevertheless, quite interesting. Both essays are worth a read.
And one of them is a lot more popular than the other. There's a lot of other videos on Tanizaki's In Praise of Shadows.
It is indeed a rather famous essay. It's something I heard talked about a few times, and that's why I bought it. Curious. I read it like a few years ago, and I was like, quite interesting,
Yeah,
and really it was nice.
Yeah.
I tried watching some of those videos, but like I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we are as annoying as them, and I just don't realize that.
Except we are not self-conscious enough.
Yes. Uh,
Well, I just didn't have the time because I'm lazy basically, and I procrastinate too much. Anyway, I rate both these pieces of work a 19 out of 41.
all right.
Hmm.
And on that note,